Welcome to the Vibrant Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Thomas. This week, I am joined with Carole as we follow up on her motherhood journey. Carole is a chiropractor's wife, mother of 3 sweet babies, and a toxic free green beauty advocate and educator. She has found her passion in helping women to live their healthiest lives and empowering them on their motherhood journey. With that, I give you the rest of Carole's story to motherhood. Enjoy.
Overwhelming sense of peace hit me while I was sitting there. And I was like, this is where I'm giving birth. Like, I'm not moving. I'm not moving till this baby's born. This is where I'm going to be. So Cody comes around the corner and peeks in the bathroom. He's like, you okay? And I was like, I'm fine. And the one thing about me when I am in labor is that I am a total recluse. I don't want touched, talked to, looked at, like nothing. I just want to be left alone. And I need to focus and I need to stay on task of what's going on. I can't have outside stimulus. I can't have noise. I can't have things that are just not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It throws me completely off. So, the dogs were barking or had started barking, and I was working through contractions on the toilet, and I could grab, I think why I liked being there so much was because I could grab the side of the sink and I could grab the side of the tub and I could kick my feet while I was going while they were hitting me, and they were hitting me hard and fast. We're talking 2 or 3 minutes apart, a minute long. So I didn't have much of a break at all. And so the dog started barking and I was just like, I can't do this. The dogs are going to wake Riker up. And then my mind started going all these places. And I was like, this baby's coming and he's going to wake up and it's going to be crazy because, he's 3 and he doesn't need to see this. And
Right.
so I was like, Cody, you've got to take out the dogs. And he's like, no, I am not taking out the dogs. You're about to have a baby and then I'm going to leave and come back and there's going to be a baby. And I was like, that's not going to happen. I was like, just please take out the dogs. I can't handle the barking. And he refused for a minute. And then he saw that I was getting really upset. And he's like, all right, fine. I'll be right back. Well, we lived on the 4th floor of an apartment building. To get outside with the dogs, you had to go to the elevator, go down to the heated parking garage, go out the side of the parking garage into the grass, and then do it all to come back up. Right. So it wasn't just a let the dog come back in. It was a whole walk all this way, go back out, come back in, go back up. So I hear the dog leashes snap and I hear the door shut in our apartment door. And he probably wasn't halfway down the hallway. And I felt this huge pressure just build, and it was just building and building and building. And I stood up and I was straddling the toilet and I looked down and I saw this bulge coming out of me basically. And I had no idea what this was. Obviously, I know now, I didn't at the time. But my water did not break until Rhen was born.
Oh,
So the bag started coming first with her head inside of it. And that was the bulge that I saw coming out basically. But I literally blacked out, Ashley, blacked out entirely. And so all I remember was there was a huge flash of light and I was sitting on the toilet when I came back to reality, opened my eyes and looked in my hands and there was Rhen in my hands.
Oh, wow.
The bathroom looked like a murder scene, but there
I can
was
imagine.
this baby in my hands. And I have no idea to this day. It was a total God thing.
Yeah.
How I caught her, how she didn't hit the toilet, I don't know. There's nothing. It's black.
Like an out-of-body experience.
It literally was.
Yeah.
It absolutely was. And then the scary thing happened where Rhen was not breathing.
Oh gosh, okay.
So this was a whole new territory because with Riker, that never happened and he was fine.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, Cody comes, I hear him come back through the door and I'm screaming. I'm like, the baby's here. I had the baby. And it was just chaos. And he comes running into the bathroom. We lived in Chicago. It was middle of October. So he's in a huge North Face jacket and it's super cold. And he's ripping his jacket off and trying to get out of the jacket. And I'm like, she's not breathing. And my midwife was on the phone because he called her outside just to see where she was and how quickly she was going to be there.
Right.
And she was still 15 minutes away. And so we're like, oh my God, what do we do? Like, what do we do? This baby's not, she's purple, like literally blue as can be. We're like, what do we do? And she's like, all right, I need you guys to put everything aside. She's like, both of you. Like, we have about 8 minutes to get this baby to breathe. And we're going to do it together, but I need you to push away everything. So, like, imagine like you just have this beautiful baby. It's your only girl. You prayed for a girl for so long. And then all of a sudden, like, she's not there. Like, she's there, but she's not there. And
Yeah.
you have to push aside all of it. Like the new baby, the oxytocin, the excitement, the joy, and get your baby to breathe because you have 8 minutes to do so before it becomes a major medical event. And so I looked at him and he looked at me and we're like, what do we do? Like, what do we do? And so she starts talking to us and she's like, all right, Carole, I want you to put her on your chest and rub her back really hard and rub her feet really hard and rub her hands really hard and talk to her and breathe on her and, all these things and keep her warm. And so we did that for what felt like an eternity and nothing worked. And she's like, did she make a noise? And we're like, no. And she's like, okay, Cody, you're going to have to give her breath. And he never hesitated. I mean, there was no hesitation. But he started basically doing neonatal CPR on her. And he was, giving her breath and nothing. And we'd see her chest rise and it would drop, but nothing happened. And I'm rubbing her feet, I'm rubbing her hands, and I'm talking to her. And I'm like, come on, Rhen, you can do this. Like, come on, you got to breathe. And it felt like hours, but it was probably literal minutes. Every second felt like an hour going by. And then finally, he gave her a breath and we were talking to her and she let out this like tiny little whimper. And it was just like a cat cry, almost like a kitten cry. Wasn't even a full cry, but it was something. And I literally watched life like enter her body, and her head turned pink and her face, her hands and her arms and legs, and it was just like a wave all the way down to her feet. And she looked at me and that was it. It was like she was fine. Nothing was ever wrong. And we were like both just, over beside ourselves, like not even know what to say. And, our midwife's on the phone still and she's like, is she breathing? What's going on? And we're like, we think so. Like she's pink now, like she's not purple. And you could hear our midwife kind of like come down at like a couple octaves too. And we were just all like in just sheer amazement, I mean,
Yeah.
of what we just witnessed. And I found out later on, and this is very common with babies that are born incredibly fast,
Yeah.
because when they're in the canal in a typical birth, as they're coming through the canal, with each contraction, they're getting squeezed. And so as they're getting squeezed, they're expelling fluid. And so that's typically why, like, as soon as they're born, they cry right away. It's because they've already expelled all the fluid out of their lungs, and that cry gets the rest of it out. Well, when they're born super fast, like that one, they don't. Basically, they just shoot through and they don't get that constant contraction to where like the body's able to expel things. So they have to do it upon birth. And
Yeah.
a lot of times those are the babies, they're called born stunned. They don't realize they're born because it happens so quickly that they need a little bit of extra time and extra work to get that first breath out so that they can get the fluid out. And of course, as we were on the phone with our midwife trying to get her to breathe, we'd also called the EMS just to be on, safe
Safe
side
side. Yeah.
in case, God forbid, we couldn't get her to breathe and she
Yeah.
needed to be taken. Um, Thankfully that wasn't the case, but they all got there at the same time, which this whole thing was like from a movie.
Yeah.
Our birth photographer showed up, which clearly she missed the boat.
Yeah.
And she let the EMTs in downstairs and they came up and walked into the apartment. And here I am still sitting on the toilet with her, still attached to the placenta. Nothing had been touched. She was still getting oxygen and blood from that. So that's
Right.
basically what was keeping her alive before she started breathing on her own, was the fact that the placenta hadn't been cut.
Right.
So had it been, that would have been a very different story.
For sure.
Which is why in the hospital setting, like when they cut it so fast, a lot of babies go straight down. It's
Yeah.
because they're still getting blood and they're still getting oxygen through there. And then that lifeline is literally chopped off from them and they go blue. Um, that wasn't the case for Rhen. She got all of it. And then so they came in and they walked into the bathroom and there were a bunch of them, like six EMT guys. Some of them stood in the living room and the other ones came into the bathroom. And they walked up to me and they had a big blanket and they wrapped it around me because I'm like postpartum shivers and all the
Yeah.
adrenaline and everything that had happened. And so they tried taking her from me and they were like, "Can we see her?" And I was like, "No." Like, no, no one's gonna touch her. And they're like, okay, well, has her cord been cut? And we're like, no. And they're like, okay, well, can we cut the cord? And I was like, no, no, no one's touching her. I was like, might as well just get that out there. So they're like, okay, well, can we at least like listen to her heart rate? Like, can we see her respirations? And I was like, all right, fine, like very hesitantly. But I like, she was up here on my chest and I like laid her down in my hands and so they like use the suction bulb on her for a second, which that really doesn't do much of anything.
Right.
And then they listen to her heart rate and listen to her respirations. And they're like, she sounds great. Like, there's doesn't seem to be any missteps in her heartbeat, her pulse is great, her respirations are great. Her color looks great. I was like, okay, good. So we're done. And they were like, I mean, yeah, if you want to be. And I was like, no, like, so she's fine. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, then you can go.
Yeah.
Like,
Bye. Doors that
I
way.
don't, I don't, I don't need you. You're fine. And they're like, so you're not going to transfer to the hospital? And I was like, no, do I need to? And they're like, well, I mean, usually people, and I was like, well, I don't, if she's fine and I'm fine, then why?
Right.
And they were like, okay, like you got to sign this AMA form stating you don't want transferred. And Cody had to sign it. Um, and I was like, I don't like, what's the point? Like, she's fine. If had she not been, that would have been a different story. But like,
Of
they
course.
literally had just told me, like, no, she's fine. So about that time, as they were there checking her out, my midwife finally got there, and she comes in the door and walks around the corner, and she's like carrying her little case with everything in it, and she like sits it down on the floor, and she's like, "Did someone call the midwife?" And I was like, "This is literally like from a movie. Like, you cannot make this up." As it's happening in real time in my house. And she walks over, she picks Rhen up from me, turns her upside down, starts like beating on her back. Rhen starts like coughing up all this stuff. The EMTs are standing there like just dumbfounded. They have no idea what they're watching.
Right.
And my midwife was like, have you nursed her yet? And I was like, no, like she's just been sitting here. And she's like, all right, well, she's been born for about 40 minutes. She's like, so you've got about 15 minutes to get her to latch because you got the first hour. It's a golden hour. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, all right, so what do I do? And she's like, well, do you want to do it here? Or she's like, we really need to cut that cord because, the cord's been there just kind of hanging on. I hadn't even delivered the placenta yet. And she's like, we need to get you to nurse so the placenta will release. And then we need to get the placenta out. So she's like, you're gonna have to walk to your room. And I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can walk. Like my legs don't even feel like they're there. And she's like, well, you're gonna have to try. So there were like two EMTs behind me. She was on one side, Cody was on the other side. I had to carry Rhen because she's still attached to the cord,
Right.
still attached to me.
Yeah.
And my birth photographer was in front of me in case I fell forward and went to the side. So there were people all around me. And I just remember like, so when Rhen was born, she was still in call mostly. If the water, I think, broke as her head erupted. So the sac was still primarily intact for the most part, and it hadn't fully come out. So it was hanging from me, literally, like out of my body. And all I remember is walking out of my bathroom. There are six men lined up in my living room that I'd never met in my life. I have on like a blue cami and no pants and no
Right.
underwear, nothing from the bottom down, and stuff hanging out of me and just a mess. I literally look like a mess. Walking to my room, and these men are watching me as I walk to my room, and I like laid down on my bed and I was like, that was the most embarrassing thing I think I've ever had to do in my entire life. And they're all laughing and like they're all like trying to make it a very lighthearted moment. They're like,
Yeah.
Mom, you just had a baby, da da da, whatever. And I'm
Yeah.
like, Yeah, but literally, like, that was very, like, almost dehumanizing to, like, have to, do that and not even be able to, like, there was nothing I could do about it. I had
Yeah.
to. So then I struggled a little bit with delivering the placenta just because I think it was attached for so long and it hadn't released yet and my body
Yeah.
hadn't let it go. And so that was not exactly that fun, because I did have to have like the whole like elbow in your uterus and push,
Mhm.
and that whole experience was not an exciting time. But Rhen was fine. She latched great from the beginning. She nursed great from the beginning. And now she's a happy, healthy 5-year-old who's thrived with life from day one. She was adjusted right after. All my kids have been, and that was, I mean, couldn't have been more different than Riker's birth in any capacity,
Yeah.
from start to finish. But it was a scary moment while it happened, but a beautiful thing that it ended up to be. And so that one was, it took a lot of process, that one. And I will say,
Yeah.
like, you know, I know I didn't have a traumatic birth in the sense of like traumatic birth in the hospital with all the interventions and all
Right.
the things going on and this, that, and the other, but it was a traumatic birth. In the sense of like doing it all myself and
Yeah.
then having to get my baby to breathe. And so it took a good like month, I would say, for me to like fully process exactly what happened and what went down. And there was still some PTSD. I think there still is. Because when Rhen gets sick, like now, as an, 5-year-old, even when she was smaller, it was worse when she was a lot younger, but now even still, like my mind will go to some pretty dark places sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
it's different than with Riker. Like when Riker gets sick, I'm like, your fever's good, your body's gonna heal, da da da, like, and it's like I go into this different mode. But with Rhen, as soon as like, especially if it's like a breathing thing, like something just like instant flashback, and it's just
Yeah.
like I almost lost her. Like I can't lose her again. I go into this deep place, and that's kind of scary sometimes. So I think that like it's not to be like pushed aside, that like it stays with you. It stays with you for a very long time. It'll probably stay with me my whole life. What I've experienced. And so if anyone that listens to this has had a traumatic birth, or has had an experience similar to mine or not, but in a way like, needed time to process what happened, like just know that it's normal, and it doesn't feel normal because you feel like that was so long ago and you should be over it by now. But it's normal, and it's something that will probably stay with me forever, just because it was a moment in time that I had to literally get a human to breathe, and that was a very hard but beautiful thing in the same sentence. So very different birth with her. And then with Rhex, again, very different birth. He We went to a pumpkin patch the day he was born. I walked around for like 8 hours that day. Was on my feet the whole day almost. It was 80 degrees, October 2nd.
Oh
We
gosh.
live in Greenville, South Carolina, so it's warm here through
Warmer
October.
than Chicago.
Yeah, much warmer, much warmer. Um, and so it was funny because on the drive home, Cody and I were joking around, and I was like, "Wouldn't it be funny if Rhex was born today?" Like after I walked around for like 9 hours, and he's like, "No, that wouldn't be funny. Like, don't talk like that," because he was still like 2 weeks away. Should have been
Right.
week and a half at least. And so I was like, I don't think I'll go this early, like 38.4. Like, that's not my skate. Like, usually I go like 39. I was like, so I
Yeah.
probably have like 6 days left. So, me thinking that, like, I wasn't even thinking anything close to being ready to go into labor. I had no diapers, I had no wipes, I had nothing prepared. I didn't even have like my towels and sheets and washcloths I needed to have for my home birth list. I didn't have my shower curtain, like nothing. I was like, I'll get all this stuff on Monday.
Right.
Like if he's born, it'll be fine. And like he won't be here for another week. And then he was like, yeah, right, mom. Like I've got different plans. So with him, we didn't find out the gender, and that was really
That's
special.
cool.
It was very hard for me because I'm a planner and I'm very type A. So like I wanted to like know just so I could buy clothes and get everything
Yeah.
ready and have things together, and Cody was like vehemently against it. He's like, no, like it's our third. We did it with our other two. Like, let's let this one be a surprise. And so finally I agreed to it. And it was actually a very beautiful thing. So I'm glad that we did. And if we had a fourth, I don't know that we would find out the gender either, just because now we've done that and it was actually a very special thing. So we might not. But he basically, I mean, he came in an hour and 25 minutes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
again,
Another quick
incredibly
one.
fast.
Yeah.
I started feeling contractions. Well, I was like kind of crampy when we got home. We put the kids to bed, and I was like, I don't feel right, but I also don't think I'm in labor. Like I didn't have that feeling yet. Like it was
Yeah.
like I maybe was going to be in the next like couple days, but it didn't feel like it was like imminent. And so I was like, well, like maybe I just need to lay down. I overdid it. I walked all day. I don't like when I'm pregnant, I don't gain weight anywhere except my belly. So I get huge, and I'm not a big person. I'm like 110 pounds, 5'5". So like I'm not a big person, and when I gain like 35 pounds on my front, it's a lot of weight. And
It
so
is.
like
Yeah.
my body overcompensates in a lot of ways for that. And my back, takes a pretty bad beating, and my hips. And so like I was in pain, and I wasn't comfortable. We were laying in bed, and it was like 11 o'clock, and it was not intensifying, but it also wasn't dissipating. And I was like, all right, something might be a little weird. I was like, Cody, you might want to fill the tub just to be safe, like just like blow it up, because it was literally in a box against the wall.
Oh
And I
God.
was like, we should probably at least have that blown up by now.
Something's ready. Couple
So
things.
I was like, at least, just in case. So he like goes out, he's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't know. Like I don't feel like I'm in labor, but I was like, you never know until it happens, right?" So he's like, "All right, well, go get it ready." So he like starts blowing up the tub and getting the liner in there and stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, like something's different about this." And so about 12 o'clock, I texted my mom, and I was like, "Hey, you wouldn't happen to have any like old washcloths or sheets, would ya?" And she's like, "What? Why?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know that I'm in labor. I kind of feel like I might be soon. And I kind of need some sheets and towels." And she's like, "Oh my God, Carole, like, are you in labor?" And like, she's like freaking out. And I was like, "Calm down. I've done this 2 times before. Like, I'm fine." I was like, "I just feel like I need to be prepared." Like something in me was like, get ready, like it was like, don't sit on this. So Cody blows a tub up and gets everything ready with that. And I called my mom, and she's like, "All right, I'll just come over." And I'm like, "Mom, it's like 12:30 at night." She's like, "It's fine. Like I'll get some stuff and I'll bring it over." So here she comes, like, I don't know, it was like 25 minutes later, she shows up at the door, and I like walked to the door and opened it, and she's like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And she wasn't around for my other two births. So she moved here about 2 years ago. And so she's been here since. And so this is the first birth that she got to actually be at
Right.
and be
That's
a
fun.
part of.
Very cool.
And so she's panicked, obviously. She's like, and she didn't have home births. She had
Yeah.
hospital births, but they were natural births, but still, well, my
Yeah.
youngest sister was an induction. But I was a natural birth, my sister was a natural birth, and they were very fast births. So she's like, she knew like this was gonna go quick.
Right.
So she's like starting to panic a little bit. And I'm like, "It's okay, mom, like take a deep breath, like I'm fine." And a
I love that you're
contraction
coaching
hit.
her.
I know. But a contraction hit as I was walking back to the couch, and I like stopped for a second, and I grabbed the side of the couch, and she looked at me and she's like, "What was that?" And I was like, "It was just a contraction. Like, I'm fine, I'm okay." And she's like, "Have you timed them?" And she's like freaking out. I'm like, "Mom," I was like, "if you're gonna start freaking out, like I'm gonna have you sit out here, because I can't have that when I'm in there." And she's like, "All right, I'll calm down, I'll calm down." And so she was just like, you could tell she was so on edge. And so I worked through a couple contractions, and they were pretty strong. And I was like, "All right, you might want to call the midwife." I was like, "Because I think this is probably it. Like we're probably gonna have a baby tonight." And by then it was like 12:45, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I called her, and she answers, and I'm like, "Hey Carrie, it's Carole. I'm in labor. I'm about to have a baby. I'm kind of freaking out." And she's like, "Okay, let me talk to Cody." And I was like, "That doesn't sound good." So I hand him the phone, and he's like, "Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay." and not like saying actual sentences.
Right.
And I'm sitting there like, this doesn't sound right. Like, what's
Yeah.
going
Like, where's she
on?
at?
And so he hangs up the phone and he's like, don't freak out. And I was like,
Things not to say.
okay. And he's like, she's on the other side of Greenville at a birth of a
Oh
mom who's
no.
41, 6.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Shit.
okay, so what does that mean? We're delivering another baby by ourselves. And he's like, no, um, the assistant Paisley's gonna come and she's on her way. And he's like, and she lives in Greer, so she'll be here in just a few minutes, but Carrie is probably not going to make it to your birth. And I was like, okay, it'll be fine. It'll be fine, whatever. So, about that time, the contractions were getting pretty bad, and I was like, all right, I need to go sit on the toilet. This is just like my water hadn't broke yet. And I was like, God forbid that happened. I'm sitting on the couch. I was like, I need to go somewhere where like, if something happens, like at least it's there, and I'm not like going to destroy everything in the house in the process.
Right.
So, I went into the bathroom. And in our room, we have a Jack and Jill bathroom. So our toilet is separate from the rest of our bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a door, which is actually quite nice.
That
So I
is
just
nice.
shut myself in there. And I sat down and I was just like, breathing and getting through it. And they were really strong. And then all of a sudden I heard the front door open and it was the assistant and she came running in and she opens the bathroom door and she starts throwing chuck pads on the floor in front of the toilet. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you throwing chuck pads on the ground? And she's like, because you're ready to have a baby. And I was like, right now? And she's like, well, do you want to do it here or do you want to do it in the tub? And I was like, no, I want to do it in the tub.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. So Cody had been filling the tub, thank God, while I was like laboring out in the living room.
Right.
And by the time I got to the living room, or to the bathroom, it was almost full. So by the time she got there, he'd turned it off. And I like my bath water to be like scalding, like
Same.
a little
Same.
cold, a lot hot. So him knowing that and not really thinking about the fact that I wasn't just taking a bath but giving birth in this tub,
Yeah.
filled it up with some pretty warm water.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the bathroom and Paisley was like, all right, next contraction, I need you to stand up and walk over and get in the tub. And I was like, okay, I can try to do that. Like, I don't know that I can walk, but I'm going to try. So work through the next contraction and they were pretty strong and pretty fast, like
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes apart, minute and a half long. So I had like a 30-second to a minute window to like get from the bathroom to the tub. And I remember I walked out, I got over to the tub. I was throwing my foot in to get in. And she's like, wait, 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 wait. And like sticks her elbow in the water and pulls it out. And she's like, you can't get in the tub. It's too hot. And I like screamed really loud
Yeah.
and like I was so upset because I was like, I really wanted this water birth. Like I really wanted in this tub and I couldn't use it.
Oh
So
no.
I was like, just throw the chalk pads on the floor. I was like, just throw them on the floor. I was like, I can't wait. Like throw them on the floor.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I stood up, the pressure was just like insane. And I got down on my hands and knees right beside the bed and I pushed once. And actually, the same thing with Rhen. Like, I didn't really even push. My body just kind of like, shoo, like fetal ejection reflex. Like, it's a real thing. And if you let
Mm-hmm.
your body get there, like, you don't even have to do anything. Your body will just shoot it out. It'll just do it all on its own. And so it was like the first push, my body just pushed really hard. And the water sac, same thing with Rhen, like the water sac came out first. Cody's hands were there, like, because he was getting ready to catch Rhex as it came out. And so he was like in position. And it was the water sac first, so that like explodes everywhere all over the floor. And then it was just like next contraction, like boom, like another just big push, and there came Rhex, just but right out, like no issues at all. And I was facing this way, and obviously on my hands and knees, and Cody was behind me, and he caught him, and there was like a few seconds had gone by, it felt like hours, and no one had said anything. And I heard Rhex cry, so I knew like he was okay, so I wasn't like panicking about that. But I didn't know what he was, and no one was talking.
Right.
And so I'm like, what's going on? Like, is it a boy? Is it a girl? Like, what? And then I hear Cody go, "Hi, buddy." And then I knew that it was another
Oh,
boy.
yeah,
And
cute.
so I was like, "Is it a boy? Like, is it a boy?" And then Cody, like, I looked back and Cody was like all teary-eyed, and like shaking his head, yes, and holding him in his hands. And then he pulled him like underneath of me, and I pulled him up to my chest and sat down and held him for the first time. And he was tiny. So like my no, let's see. Riker was 7 pounds, 10 ounces at 39.3. Rhen was 8 pounds even at 39.1. And Rhex was 6'12"
Oh, wow.
at 38.4. So he was my tiniest guy.
Yeah.
And he was small. And I remember bringing him up to my chest and I was like, oh my God, he's so like his little legs were like this big around. Like he was just so little. And cute as can be though, and perfect and pink and just like from the start, like perfect. And they helped me get into the bed, and then I delivered the placenta in the bed, started nursing him immediately. He latched great too, no issues there. And then there we were, again, like another baby in hand. And that one was really special because the kids woke up about an hour and a half after he was born.
Yeah.
So he was born at like 2:10 in the morning. That was his official time of birth. And the kids woke up at like Rhen woke up first at like 3 o'clock because she heard commotion going on, and
Right.
Paisley was still there and doing his newborn exam and stuff. And she just handed him to me. And Rhen came in the room and she like jumped up on the bed like she usually does to like go back to sleep and curled like next to Cody. And I was holding the baby and she didn't even notice it at first. And
That's
she was
cute.
just kind of like, Cody was like, Rhen, do you notice something? And she just kind of like looked at me and then like looked down at Rhex and she was like, the baby's here? Like her eyes
Aw.
just got huge. And we're like, yeah, you have a baby brother, And she was like, a brother? And we're like, yeah. And she was not happy about that because she did not want a brother. She made that
Oh,
very clear.
that's cute. That's funny.
Um, and then Riker woke up like 30 minutes later and he came in and he didn't notice at first either. And then Cody was like, Riker, look what mom has, And then Riker like looked to the side and he was like, the baby was born. And we're
Aw.
like, yeah. And he's like, what is it? And we're like, you have a baby brother. And he's like, oh, thank God. He did not want a baby sister. So
That's so
it's really
cute.
funny. Um, and then they held him and they loved on him and it's been great ever since. But I was actually kind of worried about their age gap just because with Riker and Rhen, like there's 3 years between the two of them. And that was perfect because like Riker was still really young when Rhen was born, all things
Right.
considered. Like, looking back now, I see it. Then he felt huge, but like now looking at photos and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, his little fat hands and his little toddler face. Like he was still a baby himself.
Yeah.
And then I had this newborn. So, and going from one kid or two kids to one kid, from one kid to two kids is a huge transition.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard. And I was nervous about three. And I told Cody before he got pregnant with Rhex, I was like, I know we've always said 4 was our max. I was like, but we're at this stage now where like Riker's 7, Rhen's 4. Like, they're pretty self-sufficient. They don't really need us for much. They do things, they're not in diapers anymore. They don't nurse anymore. Like we're out of all of that baby kind of stuff. And I was
Right.
like, really want to do this again and start all over again. And I was kind of hesitant about it, but then now I'm like, I couldn't imagine life without Rhex. Like he's
Oh.
just fit in and been the perfect piece of the puzzle since the day he was born, and he's brought so much joy. And like it's so fun, like watching the three of them together, even though there is like 7 years between him and Riker and four
Yeah.
years between him and Rhen. Like now, like Ren's little mother hen, and she mothers him all over the house and like makes sure he doesn't get into anything. And Riker's like, walking in with him and talking to him. And when Riker comes out in the morning, Rhex is always like so excited to see him. And, like it's their bonds are really special. And so I'm really grateful that we did it because Rhex has just been a great addition to the Fehrman family. But like I said, like so different, all three, so you just don't know. You don't know.
That's so awesome. Those are like all the questions I love to ask too. I usually like to hear what the changes you see from going from a one baby household to a two baby household, or children, I should say, because yours are a little older. But it's neat to see that because in some of the like mom groups I'm in, they'll mention, is it possible for us to have love for more than one baby? Or,
Yeah.
it's a big concern for a lot of people. And I can understand that. Like, it's a challenge. So it's cool to see you're like, no, we needed to have the three, like, right now.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
cool.
And honestly, like, we've talked about a 4th just because it doesn't feel complete yet. Like, we don't feel complete yet, and when Rex was born, like, we hadn't had a newborn in 4 years, so, like,
Right.
you forget how that feels, and I remember very, very vividly, like, sitting on the bed with Rex, and Cody was holding him and looking at him and stuff, and he was like, he's like, "I really missed this." And he's like, "You don't really realize how much you miss it until you get it back again." And
Yeah.
but like, by your third how fleeting it is. And I think you really like absorb and try to really like be so present in those moments because you know how fast they go.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, like Rex's first year of life went by in a flippin' blink. Like I thought Riker and Ren's first year went fast. It was nothing compared to Rex's. Like it was so quick. And now he's walking everywhere and he's pointing at things and this and this and this and like now we're in that fun stage, but it's like you miss it because it's
Yeah.
like you don't remember and it goes by so quick. And I think like with your first baby, you're in survival mode. Just that's the best thing and the best way to put it. And it's sad because I feel like you take a lot for granted and you miss a lot because
Hmm.
you're just so focused on like keeping this tiny human alive because you
Right.
don't know what you're doing. Everything's new. You're terrified. Every little weird noise, every little weird blink, every sound, every whatever, like you don't know what to expect or what's right or what's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think people rely on pediatricians and they rely on a lot of people outside their circle, and moms have lost a lot of that like intuition of knowing like, no, if your baby cries, you pick it up. I don't care how old it is. Like if your baby needs fed, you feed it. If
Right.
it doesn't have to be every 3 hours for 15 minutes. Like I never did schedules with my babies because they told me what they wanted when they wanted
Right.
it. It was my intuition to know like, oh, you're crying, you're probably hungry, like, and their cries and they're different, and a hurt cry is not the same as a hungry cry, and
Right.
a frustrated cry is not the same as a hungry cry. Like you learn all these things about them, and it's like if you add so much noise into the background, you take away so much of that you really don't get to experience the beautifulness of each stage and age because you're so concerned about if you're doing it right, or if it's the right way or the wrong way, or whatever the case may be. If someone's going to be mad at you or your mother-in-law doesn't agree, or like whatever it
Right.
is, like you let all
Yeah,
that
you're losing
noise.
your intuition and your
You
gut
do.
feel.
You can very
Yeah.
easily. And so I think like the biggest thing is just always follow your mom gut because it really is huge. Like you know your baby better than anyone in this world. You've been, they literally grew inside you for 9 months. Like you know them like you know the back of your hand, whether or not you think you do or not. And so it's like, just let your intuition kind of flow there, and you'll see like it'll unfold into something really beautiful because then you will feel very deeply bonded and very deeply connected. You won't have postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression and all these things because your head's not going to all those places of like, am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong, is it enough, is it not enough, did they eat enough, have they peed 15 times today, like there's just so much stuff that can convolute all of it
Right.
that like you really don't appreciate the moments that you have, and they're so fleeting. Like the nights are so long but the days are so short. It's so true. And parenting is so bittersweet because you want them to stay little but you also love watching them grow and blossom into these humans that you've created and have guided along the way, and you see them learning new things and doing new things and being people that you had a hand in creating, and
Creating.
that
Yeah.
it's really a wild feeling. It's a wild thing. And you can let a lot of things cloud that and make that feel like it's so overwhelming or so overpowering or so um not fun, like it takes a lot of the joy out of parenting, and it really shouldn't because it is fun, and they are yours. I mean, you're the one that's shaping them into who you want them to be. So, take that to heart because it is a very special job.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's all so beautifully said. And you have so many like golden nuggets about your intuition, listening to your intuition, and having the proper birth team, having the proper people in the room. Like
Yep,
when you set
that's
boundaries
huge.
with mom, like sometimes
Yep,
it has to be even the people that we love the most that we have to set our boundaries
yep,
with, and
yep.
just surrendering to the whole process of giving birth to baby. I mean, it's just such a cool experience that as women we get to the joy of getting to experience essentially.
Yeah.
It's
And I
really
think
cool to hear.
that's what, like, someone asked me, like, what's the best advice you'd give a first time mom? And I really think that's it. It's surrender. Like, don't try to let yourself be in control. Just let your body take over and do its job. And when you feel like you're at the point to where you just can't do it, that's when you're the closest to doing it. And I
Yeah.
remember, like, with Riker's birth, like at one point in the tub, I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't do this. And I like kind of let that loop start to play. And my midwife was like, I want you to reach down right now. And I was like, no, like, I'm not doing that. She's like, no, you're going to like reach down right now. And I did. And I felt the top of Riker's head.
Yeah.
And so like, I knew how close he was. And like, that's why the pain was getting so intense. And that's why everything
Right.
was ramping up. And it was like, all right, no, this baby's coming out. Like, and that was what I needed in that moment was her sternness of like, no, you're going to do this. Like, you can't go back.
Yeah.
Um, but also like, she did it in a loving way of like knowing that in that moment, like I needed someone to be the voice of reason because my head was starting to go into a direction that it shouldn't go.
Right.
And I needed someone to bring me back. And so she did. And that is really important. Having the proper people in the room. I mean, if I feel like I've been very blessed with Cody because he does exactly what I need when I need it. And I think that that's been a really big weight off my shoulders when I know when I'm in the middle of labor, I'm about to give birth, is that I know I don't have to like dictate to him what I need. He just knows what I need.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I need quiet and I need no one to talk to me and don't touch me. And I'm not the mom that's like, I want cuddles and love and intimacy. Nope, I don't want no one looking at me. And he knows that and he gives me that space and that freedom to like do my thing, right? And so I think that's very valuable. And I also feel like as women and especially as moms, like a lot of times I hear like, well, I wanted to have a home birth, but my husband didn't, or I wanted this, but my husband didn't. I get and I agree with the fact that like it should be a mutual decision. But honestly, at the end of the day, if you truly feel like it's going to affect your birth in a huge way, like if Cody would have said, I want a hospital, like because of what happened with Rhen, let's say, if after that Cody would have said, I want a hospital birth because I'm too afraid because of what happened with Rhen or, whatever, like we can't have that again. So let's have Rhex in a hospital. I would have been like, absolutely not. It's not a negotiable for me. And I
Right.
don't let it be because I don't want to give birth in a hospital. I don't. I have absolutely no um I have nothing in me wants that. I don't want people coming in my room 24/7. I don't want people checking on me all the time. I don't want to be hooked up to machines. I want to eat when I want to eat. I want water when I want water. I don't want to be told no. Like I don't want that. I want
Right.
the control of the way my situation will go and I accept the outcome. Right? So it's like that would have just been a non-negotiable and I would have been like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. Like if that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but like this is my birth. And ultimately, like as women, we're the ones that carry that for the rest of our lives. So if you're letting another influence factor into that decision that you feel very strongly about, but you kind of just go with because you feel like you have to keep the peace, like just know that in some cases, if something goes wrong, God forbid, in that situation that you chose because you wanted to keep the peace, that that's something you're going to have as baggage for the rest of your life and live
Right.
with that decision. And so I really don't think it's a decision that should be taken lightly. And who is in your room also should not be taken lightly. Because if it is people that are very high strung or very scared or very fearful, and my mom knew I was going to be okay. I've given birth 3 times. Like she knows that I would have been fine, that I was going to be fine. But I think it was like the whole, like, her actually getting to be here and, experience me going through it, that was hard for her because it's
Yeah.
like, you're a mom. You don't ever want to see your kids in pain. You don't want to see your
Yeah.
kids hurting, even at, her being 56 and me being 33. Like, she didn't want to watch me go through that. And, but at the same time, knew the beautiful outcome that would come of it. And so, like, she wasn't in the room when he was born. She was in the living room, and she heard him cry for the first time, and well, she heard me scream, and then she heard him cry. And then after he had been born for a few minutes, then she got to come in and see him. So it was like a very beautiful transition. Like, she was still here and she was still present, but she wasn't holding my hand. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you have in that room who you feel the most at peace with and the most safe with, because ultimately those are the people that you're going to want by your side when you're going through the most intense thing in your life that you'll ever experience. And so there's a way you can do it, and you can still have those people around you, but they don't have to be right next to you. And I think that's a really beautiful thing too, because you can still have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, next question would be, if or when you do it again, have another baby, is there anything you would change or hope to happen outcome wise of a fourth baby, fourth birth?
Um, I don't know that there's anything I would change necessarily. Um, I don't I mean, everything with Rex's birth was pretty much the way that you would think it would be. Um, I had a great, like, midwife that I saw for his entire, the prenatal stage of it. I always felt very respected and supported there, so that was never like an issue with like my birth team or anything like that. Um, the only thing I do wish was that there was a little more support after birth.
Mhm.
I feel like this is a topic I could talk about for days, but no one really thinks about postpartum in the way that it should be.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things that happen in the first 40 days after birth, not only to the body but also to the mind of a mother. And I feel like in our society, in the way that our maternity care system is set up, and I mean, we could literally have a whole podcast just on this topic.
Right.
But
We'll
the
have to do
way
an
that,
episode too.
yeah, right, exactly. But the way the whole thing is set up, I think it really pushes mothers to fail
Yeah.
or feel like they're failing. And I think that is one of the major issues that we have when it comes to mothers' mental health is, one, they go through this huge traumatic, most of them, sadly, go through a traumatic birth experience in a hospital setting. And then they're coming home. If they've had a C-section, they're coming home. Usually they've had a lot of drugs pumped into their body. And they're not really in their right mind. They're coming home with a brand new baby that's going to require 24-hour care and watch, where they haven't even healed and they haven't even been able to function on their, normal self yet. Even moms that haven't had traumatic births, it's still, your body takes time to heal.
Right.
You can't get up and run a marathon 12 hours after giving birth, whether you've done it the natural way or not.
Hmm.
And so I think that we forget about mom a lot. And so, I think a big thing is, like, people think, "Oh, I'll come over and I'll hold the baby, and or I'll come over and see the baby, and I'll that'll give mom a little bit of a break." It doesn't really give us a break. We don't really want you to take the baby. What we want is you to wash our dishes or help us with the laundry, or watch our other kids while we sit with our new baby.
Hmm.
Like, there's, I think, a lot of stigma behind moms asking for help
Yeah.
in general, like, just in motherhood the entire way through. And you hear the quote, "It takes a village," but the reality is a lot of us don't even have a village.
Yeah.
And what village can you call on when there's no village to call on? So it's like with Rhen, when Rhen was born, Cody was working 7 days a week and he got 12 hours off, and then he had to be back at the office.
Right.
So I'm by myself 12 hours post birth with a newborn and a 3-year-old. And that was really hard because I'm trying to keep him in the house and not, he's running all over the place and getting into things, and I'm chasing him around and holding a newborn and had just given birth 12 hours prior. Like, my body wasn't ready for that. I needed to be on
Right.
a couch and sitting solid and not moving. But I didn't have that option, and there's a lot of moms that don't have that option.
Right.
So what I would really like to see, you know, um, is more people think about that postpartum period, even
Mhm.
if it's just the week after birth or 2 weeks after birth, like those really fragile times where it could really make or break a mom is in those moments. And so it's not that, and a lot of moms get anxious when they have to give their baby up to be held to other people.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to. That's not instinctually the way it is. Like,
No.
you kind of want to hold that really close,
That's
and
where
so
Mama Bear
yeah.
comes from,
Yeah,
right?
it does. It really does, and it comes through in ways that, like, you can't really even explain.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels wrong to, like, hand over this new being to someone else, even if it's for 15, 20 minutes at a time. That baby is you, it's part of you, and so it feels like you're giving a part of you away.
Yeah.
And even though it might be someone you love and trust with everything you have, like, it's still not instinctually you. Like, so I don't know. I think I was kind of surprised with just like how there was very little aftercare um in with the midwifery that I had, but also just in general. Like,
Mhm.
no one really called to check on me. No one really. He had like one weight check and that was it, and that was kind of like pushed off for a while because they were busy and there were things going on, and so like it kind of felt like we got put aside. It's like, okay, he's here, it's over, kind of thing, and so I think that's a big thing when looking for a midwife that you should ask. What does the after birth care look like? Am I going to see you every 2 weeks? Am I not going to see you at all? Are you going to come the day after birth and then that's it? Like, what does that look like? Because I think that's a big part that's missed, and it's a really important part that's missed. And so just changing the stigma around like what a mom truly needs after giving birth versus what everyone thinks she needs, and not being afraid to ask her, like, what do you need? Do you need me to come over and wash your dishes? Do you need me to come over and watch the kids for a couple hours? Do you need me to come over and do some laundry? Like, where's your head? What do you need me to do? How can I help you? Do you need me to come cook you dinner? The last thing you want to think about is dinner when a
Yeah,
baby's born.
for sure.
And so it's like even little things like that add up, and they make a big mental load for that new mom, to try to have to figure out like, oh no, I got to think about dinner. I just, like, what am I even going to do? I don't know. I don't even know what's in the fridge. I haven't been out of the room for 3 days. So,
Right.
it's just little things like that I think we really need to bring back into the conversation of like, what does a mom truly need in those very fragile weeks after first giving birth? Because I think postpartum is just kind of like shoved off to the side.
Right.
It's an afterthought. We want to talk all about labor. We want to talk all about birth and how much pain it is and all the things about birth. We want to talk about the things you should do before you give birth, but what about mom afterwards? And so that's something that I think I would like to see more, is just have a better plan for like the aftercare portion. And know that like, that part is really important too. And thankfully with Rhex, like Cody ended up taking the whole week he was born off because we have our own office now and have that freedom.
Yeah.
But had he not, like, what would we have done? So it's
Yeah.
like that's a big deal. And then I think of like single moms who literally have no one, like, what do? They just get sent home with the baby and they're like, here you go, have fun
Yeah.
next 18 years. And they don't have any help and they don't have anyone. So I think that's a big thing um, that I was kind of surprised about, was that there really wasn't much in the after portion
Yeah.
of it. It just kind of felt like, okay, the baby's here, our job's done. Good luck, have a nice life, kind of thing. So that was something that I might like to see. I would like to see change for sure. And then what was your second question? That was your
That
first one, but I
that
didn't want
was
to say.
it for that. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
we
And
haven't
then the
got to the second
last
question.
question, yeah, the last question is, if there was a theme song to being a mother or motherhood, being a parent, what do you think the theme song would be, or what's your current theme song?
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, I don't even know. That's a really good question.
Well, my other favorite question to ask is if your life was a movie, what genre would it be?
Mm. If my life right now was a movie, it would definitely probably be a comedy. Because there's a lot of things that happen in this house that you're like, did I just say that? Like, did those words really just come out of my mouth? Like, I don't even realize. Like yesterday, here's an example. Yesterday, I was sitting on the couch and I look over and my daughter like is like biting my son like on the leg for I don't even know what reason. Like she puts her mouth on him. And then my toddler is in the hallway and pointing, and I see that the dog had an accident, and he is like just like beat feeding as fast as he can towards the lovely defecation of the dog on the floor. And I'm like, don't touch the poop, stop biting your sister. Like, da, da, da. Like there's just like
Yeah.
so many random things coming out of my mouth, and I'm just like,
Who
that
would have thought this would all come together at the same
but
time?
why do I even have to say these things? Like these are common sense. Like, you just say like the funniest stuff as a mom, I think, and you don't even really think about it. Like, I'm like, stop biting your brother. Don't lick that. Like, leave the poop alone. Like, like this is like all these like I don't know. And like, is that chocolate? Like, what is that? Like, it's so funny.
Helping
Um,
build the gut flora, right?
Oh yeah, all of it. But yeah, that would definitely in this house right now, I would say it would definitely be a comedy. I'm trying to think of the song title that what is that song called? It's basically I don't think it's Sarah Bareilles, but it actually might be. But it's her I think she sang it. It's basically about strength
Yeah,
because as a mom, like you have to be strong, but you also have to know that like it's okay to not be strong. Like there's times when like you have to put on a really brave face for your kids because you just have to. And then there's times when like you don't. And I think it's in those times of vulnerability that you let them see, especially now, like my kids are 8 and 5. So they're starting to learn about like their own emotions and how we treat people and how that our words have meaning and that they can really hurt you if you say them the wrong way. And like my 8-year-old and I actually just watched a video of the rice experiment because he's like he will when he gets angry he uses his words in a very mean way and sometimes he says things that are very hurtful and he doesn't understand that he's doing that because he's
right,
that mental capacity is just not there yet, but I want him to start understanding that like your words are powerful and the words that you say matter, and that's why we don't say I can't and I like words like that because that means that you're telling yourself you will never do something that you could do. And we do a lot of like positive affirmations with our kids and stuff like that because I feel like it's something that we lacked as children. And because of that, we each carry our own childhood wounds around, that we're now healing. And that's a big thing that's not talked about either. It's a big elephant in the room is when you become a parent, the hardest thing is you now have to also reparent you.
mhm,
And I think too, like it's interesting to think about the fact that like Riker, who is now 8, got a version of me that Rhex is never going to see.
mhm,
Like I'm not the person I was at 24 that I am at 34. So it's like he kind of got the unhealed, messy version of me, whereas Rhex is getting more of my healed side. And now I'm aware of my triggers and I've been working on myself and I do a lot of personal development and I listen to a lot of podcasts and I've really dived into that realm to heal my own childhood trauma. And like Riker was kind of in the middle of that. Like he kind of came into that mess. And he's actually the reason why I started doing it. Because when he turned about 4 was when I really started to notice, like, okay, I don't want to be this mom. Like,
yeah.
I'm yelling all the time. I'm angry. I'm impatient. I'm uncaring. I'm not kind. Like, that's not who I want him to remember me as or know me as. And so I really had to dig deep and figure out like why I was so mad. And it all stemmed from childhood trauma of never feeling safe. And so when I get ignored or when I say something to him and he like stonewalls me, it makes me feel like I don't have a voice. And then that takes me back. So it's just like they were all these things that were building. And now I know that and I can address it and I'm aware of it. And so when I start to have those moments and time where I start to feel like I'm not heard or I'm not seen, I can tell myself like, no, that's not true. Like, this is just he's one, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I can reason with it a lot better versus when he was young, I couldn't. So I think that's a big thing that people don't really talk about when it comes to parenting too, is that like you want your children to have, I see this meme all the time and it's like, I want my child to have a past that they don't have to heal from or a childhood
Right.
they don't have to heal from. And it's really powerful because you don't even realize it. But when you have a child first, like they do get the messy version of you if you don't choose to heal. And then by the time a third one comes 7 years later and you're in a completely different place in your life or you're in a completely different place in your head, like you aren't that same person. I'm not the
Right.
same person that I was 10 years ago. So I think there's something really beautiful about it, but there's also something really sad about it because you don't you just kind of have to take the punches as they come, for lack of a better word, but know that like now you know better, so you can do better at the same time.
Right.
And so you have to be strong, but you also have to be vulnerable because you have to teach them, what those feelings mean. And they don't know those words. They can't put words like I'm feeling embarrassed. Like they don't know what embarrassed is. Like he's 8 and he still doesn't really get that fact. So like he was starting to like, for example, when he would get embarrassed over something, he would say like, I'm just going to kill you. And it wasn't coming from a place of like him truly wanting to be malicious and murder you.
Right.
It was coming from him feeling something in his body when he would get that feeling that he couldn't express and he didn't know what he was feeling. So it came out that way because he knew that that would get attention. And so it was like, no, buddy, like that's not what we say and it was like having a conversation of like, what do you feel like
Mhm.
when you feel like that? Where does it feel? Where do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your belly? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your head? Like, where do you feel that feeling? And we could have, do you feel it in your heart? Like, where is it? And then we could kind of dissect it out into, okay, that's not this. It's you're feeling embarrassed. It's called feeling embarrassed, and then explaining this is what embarrassed means, and this is what your body feels like when you're embarrassed. Your cheeks might get red. You might feel like you want to like cover your head up and like you don't want people to see you, or you feel like you're you want to go kind of crawl in a hole, or something. Like those are the ways that your body's going to feel. And so it was like literally having a conversation like that with him to get him to understand like this is what it means. And so I think like letting them express themselves in the ways they're going to express themselves, but then letting them also know that like you feel those things too. Like it's not just you, buddy. Like if someone told me, or if someone told a story about me about something that I did as a kid that I felt really embarrassed by, I wouldn't feel good either. So it's like even that simple, like letting them see that you're human too and that you're making mistakes right alongside of them. And so I think that song I'm pretty sure it might be called Stronger, but it's by Sarah Bareilles.
Mhm.
Um, but it represents a lot for me because it's like I think a lot of times we think we have to be like the trophy on the shelf for our kids and we can't let them see the messy parts
Right.
because then they're going to think one way or the other about us. But the reality is like when we don't let them see those messy parts, then they think that like life is just always here. And
Right.
then the real world's going to show them that that's not the case. And so when that happens, you want them to know how to handle those situations and be good people and not come out swinging because they've only seen good and they've never seen the bad.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my in a nutshell.
That's so beautifully said. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this empowering episode of Vibrant Beginnings hosted by me, Dr. Ashley Thomas. This podcast is powered by Creating Vibrant Families, where our mission is to help couples on their journey to conception gain health for radiant pregnancies through to birth. Follow along for more empowering journeys to parenthood. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Have a good day. Bye.